right. Hey, welcome everybody here. And also want to say a special welcome to all those who are joining us online. So glad that you're with us. And let me ask you a question. How many of you like to be challenged? How many of you like to be? Okay, one of you. That's wonderful. Hopefully online you all raised your hand, but no matter what your answer was, get ready to be challenged. And here's the thing. I actually think that's a good thing. I think that's a necessary thing because your greatest growth always comes with challenge. This past summer, I decided to take up bike riding for exercise. In fact, here's a picture of me getting ready to go on a ride. And I know what you're thinking. He looks like Lance Armstrong without the steroids. I know exactly what you're thinking. And so I take up bike riding. So I go on my first ride. And at the last part of the ride, I have to go up this really large hill, and I'm not biking shape, and I don't really know how to use the gears yet, and so I'm just kind of hugging and tugging up this hill, and I'm going, and I'm huffing. And I get to the top of it, and I stop, and I step off the bike, and I kind of just lean over like this, and I almost puked right there on the side of the road. And it was a busy street, so that would have been an interesting view for a lot of cars going by, but it was there that I challenged myself that eventually I was going to get to the point where I nailed that hill. Well, you fast forward a few weeks, I'm out for a bike ride again, and I cruised up that hill. And when I got to the top, instead of puking, I started fist pumping. And the reason why I was able to do it is because I challenged myself to grow stronger, and as a result, I got stronger. Your greatest growth in any area of your life always comes with challenge. Now, today what I want to do is I want to challenge you with something that Jesus said. In fact, if you follow Jesus, you probably heard these words before, but for most of us, we have never really thought through what these words mean for our lives. And so we're going to look at the very words that Jesus said to his disciples when he called them. And I really believe that these words weren't just for them, that these words were for us also. Here's what Jesus said to his disciples. He said this, he said, "Come, follow me." And for many of us, we've said, okay, Jesus, I'm going to follow you. Hey, easy enough, right? But Jesus's invitation leads to another question that for most of us, we have never even considered before. It's like, well, Jesus, okay, I'll follow you, but where are we going? Now, Jesus is so brilliant. Because in inviting us to follow him, he wants us to ask, where are we going? Because where is tied to this very important concept, vision. And when I talk about vision, I'm not talking about eyesight. I'm talking about seeing exactly what Jesus sees and then giving our lives to that very thing. You see, when Jesus invites us to follow him, he is saying, I have a vision for my church to make the biggest impact in this broken world. And I've invited you to be a part of that. And Jesus' vision is so big and it's so bold, and yet at the same time, it's so challenging that if we are willing to give our lives to it, we will make the biggest difference that we could ever make with our one and only life. Now, before we talk about what this vision is, I want us to first talk about just this whole idea of vision and what it means for our lives and why it's so important for our lives. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that is, but I just want to talk about two that are really important for us. Here's the first reason why vision is so important. Vision gives us the why behind the what. I would bet that most of us have a story that goes something like this. We were trying to make some sort of change in our life to make our lives better. And so here's what we did. We got a list of, okay, here's what I need to do. And that was kind of our strategy to get the list of what's, and we started out good for a while. And listen, it's important to get a list of what's, all right? It's important. And so we started out good for a while, but then eventually we defaulted back to the same routines and same habits as before. You see, if we want lasting change in our life, a list of what's is important, but it's not enough. We first need the why. We're in the series, and we're wrapping it up today, called Reboot. And over the course of this series, we have been talking about 3 spiritual practices that if we engage in, that it will produce what we have been calling flourishing faith. And flourishing faith is a faith that we've defined as this. It's a faith that is attractive to be around. It's strong. It's lasting. It makes an impact no matter what the circumstances are. And as we've gone through this series and we've talked about these spiritual practices, it is so easy for us to see these spiritual practices as a list of what's. It's kind of like we go, okay, all right, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to regularly attend service. Okay, I'm going to do that. And then, oh yeah, okay, I'm supposed to, connect deeply with others in a small group, and I'm supposed to serve on a team. Here's something that we all do. If we just see these as a list of what's, here's what can happen to all of us. We begin to look at these what's, and then we begin to do a cost-benefit analysis on these what's. And so we start to look at them, we go, okay, well, listen, if I start to attend service on a regular basis, that means I have to, give up some time here. And then if I serve on a team, and it's like, okay, I got to reprioritize some things there. We start to kind of move things around, and we just do this cost-benefit analysis. Without vision, the cost of the what's will always outweigh the benefits. Because without vision, we aren't really sure what the what's actually are. You see, vision helps us see the benefits of these spiritual practices. That if you give your time, talents, and treasures to these, that they will help you step into the vision of impact that Jesus has for your life. I mean, why should you engage in these things? Because they grow your faith. And as your faith grows, so will the opportunities and experiences in Jesus' vision will grow with it. Now, here's the second reason why vision is so important. Vision is the great unifier. One of the best things, and there was so many great things about the Bucs championship run, was the Deer District. And I actually got some pictures here of the Deer District. And if you can remember in Game 6, the clinching Game 6, there was about 65,000 people in the Deer District at this time. And I got to be honest, every time I saw pictures of the Deer District, my first reaction was, well, if you're in the middle of that, how do you use the restroom? And my wife said, don't ask that question. It's probably a bad question. But you get the Game 6. I want you to look at this last photo here. 65,000 people here in this crowd. And here's what I want to tell you about this crowd. This is pretty fascinating. I bet you didn't know this. In that crowd, there are Democrats and Republicans. There are liberals and conservatives. There are mask wearers and there are non-mask wearers. There are people who have been vaccinated and there are people who have not been vaccinated. Did you know there are white people, black people, Asian people? There are rich people, there are poor people, there are people from the city, there are people from the suburbs. I would even bet that there are a few Chicago Bull fans in the Deer District right now. So here's what you have. You have this large group of people with all these differences, yet they are completely unified. Do you know why that is? Because the vision is the main thing. And the vision is to win a championship. And thank God they did just that. You see, vision unifies because it keeps the main thing the main thing. And when the main thing is the main thing, the other non-main things, when they fight for main thing status, they take a back seat because the vision is always the main thing. Now, these other non-main things that I'm talking about, I'm not saying that they're not important. What I'm saying is they aren't the most important. Let me take a moment just to offend some of you for a minute. Now, as I say that, I'm an equal opportunity offender, okay? And I'm actually not someone who likes offending people. I'm not offending people just to offend people. If I offend you, I'm offending you because I love you. And I want you to grow out of this, because if you don't grow out of this, it's going to keep you from experiencing something better. And that is the vision that Jesus has for your life. You see, some of you, as we've gone through this season, you have taken non-main things and you have tried to make them the main thing. I can't tell you how many conversations I have had with pastors from around the country, and we're all experiencing the same thing. And the stories that we tell each other are all the same. It's amazing. And here's how the story goes. Oh, hey, people from our church go, well, I'm leaving your church because, of this or that. Or, you know what, I don't like the way you handled that situation, so I'm going to get mad and I'm going to leave and I'm out of here and all that stuff. Listen, when I hear those stories, here's what I think. You have lost sight of the main thing. And it's causing unnecessary division because it always causes division. And it's causing us to lose influence with the very people that God has called us to influence. See, every time I hear those stories, I just grieve and I hurt for you. And the reason why that is because you think your issue or your platform is where Jesus is going. But Jesus has made it very clear where he's going, and he's not going in that direction. If the Deer District can figure it out, so can the local church. And so could we. Because Jesus' vision is one of the greatest visions to be a part of. Why winning an NBA championship in our city is great and it's wonderful. The reality is it has no eternal impact on us individually and our city. So Jesus says, follow me. Well, where are we going, Jesus? Well, there are many parts in the New Testament where Jesus tells us exactly where he's going. And we're going to look at one chapter in particular. In fact, if you don't follow Jesus for whatever reason, and you probably have a very good reason why you don't, you should read this chapter. Because as you read this chapter, Jesus tells us about God's heart for you. And I think as you discover what that is, you will be pleasantly surprised at that. In Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells us 3 parables, and it's the parable of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son, or as some people call the prodigal son. Now, it's very interesting about this is that Jesus would often teach a parable, and then he would tell the spiritual truth out of that parable, and then he would tell another parable that was going to tell another spiritual truth. But this time, and it's the only time he does this, he tells 3 consecutive parables communicating the same spiritual truth. So it's as if he says, well, listen, if you didn't hear me, I'm going to say it again. And if you did hear me, I want you to keep hearing me. And so Jesus begins, and he says, what man who has 100 sheep, if one got lost, wouldn't leave the 99 behind, and he would go look for that one lost sheep. And then when he found that one lost sheep, he would pick up that lost sheep, and he would put it on his shoulder, rejoicing, and he would pull out his cell phone, and he would call all his friends and family, and he would say, hey, come on over, because when I get home, we're going to have a big party, because my lost sheep has been found again. And then at the end, he tells us the truth behind this story. And he says this, he says, I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need to repent. And immediately he goes into the second story. He says, or if a woman has 10 silver coins, but she loses one of the silver coins, would she not tear that house apart in order to find that one lost coin? And then when she finds that coin, she calls all her family and all her friends. She says, come on over. We're going to have a party because my lost coin is now found. And then he then tells us, once again, the truth regarding that story. And I want you to notice how similar the verbiage is to the first one. And he says this, in the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. And then he ends it by telling a story that most of us have heard of before. It is this story of the prodigal son, or the story of the lost son. And Jesus said there was a father who had 2 sons, and one of them wanted his inheritance in advance. And so he gave him the inheritance, and the son left, and he blew all the inheritance on sinful living. Well, he reaches a point where he just realizes, man, what I did was wrong. I'm going to try to go home, and I'm going to at least try to be a servant in my father's household. So the son heads home, and as he's close to home, it says his father sees him. And little did he know that his father waited for him day after day, and he sees him, and the father runs out, and he grabs him and he hugs him and he fully restores him into his family. And then Jesus closes the stories with this truth. He said, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Now, what's interesting about these stories, we see a few common themes in these stories. One of them is that there's something in each one of them that's both in the wrong place and the right place. Think about them. In the wrong place, you have the lost sheep, the lost coin, and then you have the lost son. Well, in the right place, it's the 99 sheep, it is the 9 coins, and then the older brother. And then another thing that we see is that there's a person representing God. In the first one, the shepherd's representing God. In the second one, a woman is representing God. And then in the third one, the Father is representing God. Now, the big point, the big focus that Jesus is trying to make is this. Which one of these two categories gets God's focus? And so you look at the first one. You look at, is it the 99 found sheep or is it the one lost sheep? The shepherd's full focus is on the one lost sheep. Okay, let's look at the second one. Is it the 9 coins or the one lost coin? The woman's full focus is on the one lost coin. And then the last one, the father's focus is on the lost son. And so Jesus invites us to follow him. And we say, okay, Jesus, where are you going? And he says this, I'm going to look for any person who is in the wrong place. Did you know that this is the vision that Jesus has called us to? And this is the original version of Christianity as we know it. And when we are willing to give ourselves to this vision, we have no idea what's possible with God.
My name is Libby, and I started originally coming to the Ridge because my parents brought me. I was around 9 or 10. They had originally gone when it was in the theater, and then they brought us to when it was at Whitnell High School, and that was my first time that I came to the Ridge. My faith started to shift when I got to college because I went through a really difficult time. It was fall of 2020, so amidst the pandemic, I was attending Marquette University and going into one of their direct nursing programs. Was going to be a cheerleader there. Basically had everything set up for me. But despite all that, battled with anxiety, depression, eventually an eating disorder, and a medical flare-up with a diagnosis I have called POTS. I was sitting in a service that Pastor Mark was leading, and this is right when I came home from school. And at the end of the service, he just kind of said that you need to give him all of you. And that's when I kind of made that decision. I'm not going to hold back anymore, and I'm going to take his hand this time, and I'm going to pursue this. I'm going to let him have all of me. I met Erica and Rachel pretty early on when I first kind of pursued Jesus. I sparked an interest when I was going through a difficult time in college, met with Pastor Mark just with some questions, and he immediately hooked me up with Erica. I think it was almost like that next week I had my first meeting with her, and we clicked immediately. And I think within the first 10 minutes, she told me about Alpha, and Rachel had been the leader of Alpha for that next group coming up. And so she kind of led me through that group, and then we later on met weekly. So I met weekly with Rachel, and I also met weekly with Erica. For me, it was important to have influential people propelling my faith journey like Erica and Rachel, because they were such huge role models and they supported my questions, and I had a place to go when I was curious and when I wanted to learn more. And they pushed me to learn more and to really know him. And I sort of realized through them that in order to understand myself, which was something I was dealing with, I needed to understand him and understand the Creator. Fast forwarding to April on Easter, they encouraged me beforehand to get baptized, kind of set it in the back of their mind. Wasn't pressuring me, but just kind of leaving it as an option. At first I was like, no, I don't think I'm ready. But during that service, something just hit me and I was like, okay, yep, this is now, I want to do this. And I did a spontaneous baptism on Easter. I absolutely think Jesus was pursuing me to follow him through this whole journey. And I think the timeline is really interesting in the sense that in the beginning, when it was my junior and senior year of high school and when I didn't really know what was going on, there was that missing piece and nothing was getting solved and everything was confusing. I also wasn't in a place where I was following him, so I couldn't really get the adequate treatment that I needed. And after I followed him, then I was able to start healing myself through him and with him. My life has changed insanely over the past year. I never thought that I would take a break from school. In high school, I was very type A, built myself up to be this person that I thought other people liked. And of course, that put me in a position where I was insecure and developed other mental health issues down the road. And so now having his acceptance, and which I always had, but just knowing his acceptance, I'm able to trust myself. I have more peace. I have the freedom to make mistakes. I get to be around and talk with cool people like Erica and Rachel and learn from them. My relationships have changed tremendously. And now I'm going on this backpacking trip, which I'm so excited for. And it's just like this non-traditional route that he's taking me through. And also treatment for my eating disorder, because I don't think I would have ever taken that step to really heal myself and heal all these other problems I was having if it weren't for him.
I'll tell you what, there is nothing better than seeing God work in someone's life like that. And there is nothing, and there's no greater impact that you can ever have on someone else's life than when you help them discover who Jesus is. None. And there is nothing that'll grow your faith more than when you are a part of a journey like that. Because now the main thing is the main thing. And all the other spiritual practices, you're starting to discover that they are there to position you and point you to being a part of the main thing. But here's the greatest challenge that every one of us faces individually, and every church, including this one, faces. Our natural tendency is to always replace Jesus' vision with something else. And here's how I know that. In all my years as a pastor, I have never had someone come up to me and go, "Hey, Mark, I got to tell you something. I just want to let you know, I'm leaving the Ridge because we aren't dreaming big enough on how we can help more people find Jesus. Hey, Mark, I need deeper teaching on how to help my neighbor take next steps towards Jesus. Hey, Mark, can we do a capital campaign? Because I want us to just kind of amp it up here so we can be even more aggressive and how we can reach people more for Jesus." Listen, if that happens, then I'm going to retire because I've done my job. But listen, here's what you need to know. The church, it is for us. It's for you. But according to Jesus, it's not about us. In fact, this phrase right here might be the biggest takeaway that you get from this message. And it's this phrase right here. It's not about me. It's not about me. In fact, can we just say this together? Because every single one of us, we struggle with this whole idea. Let's say it together. Ready, go. It's not about me. And here's the thing. This might be the most freeing thing for some of you, because, here's what you try to do. You want to get your needs met. And let me just tell you this. If you want your needs met, don't pursue your needs. Rather, pursue the mission and the vision that Jesus has for your church, for his church. And in doing so, your deepest needs will be met. As we wrap up our Reboot series, I want to just challenge you with two things. Remember, our greatest growth always comes with challenge. And I think if there's ever an area, because this is our biggest challenge as a church to do and an individual to do, this is a challenge. And I want you to take this challenge, and I hope you'll take it seriously. But I want to challenge you to do two things. Here's the first challenge. I want you to honestly answer the question, Jesus, where are you going? And the reason why I want you to be honest, I want you to answer, because you already have an answer to this question, whether you realize it or not. And I just want you to identify what those non-main things are in your life that you are trying to put, or maybe you have already put in main thing status. And the reason why I want you to do this is because our tendency is to hold on to those things so tightly because we think they're so important. And if you keep holding on to those things so tightly, listen, you're going to miss out on where Jesus is going. And you're going to get angry, and you're going to get frustrated, and you're going to blame me, and you're going to blame the church. And listen, it's not the church's fault. You've lost sight of the main thing. The second thing I want to challenge you to do is, would you commit to investing in year one? Now, if you've spent any time around here, you will hear us talk about year one quite often. We actually got the name year one from the parables that we just looked at. The parable of the one lost sheep and the one lost coin and the one lost son. Year one is any person in our life that's not a bad person. They're just someone who is in the wrong place right now. They don't know Jesus. And I just want you to be intentional about investing in them. What does that look like? It means this. Be intentional about praying for them, about serving them, about sacrificing for them, about making their life better. And then when the opportunity arises, ask them their story. Maybe you get the chance to share your story with them, or maybe you share some content that we're creating, or maybe when the time is right, you invite them here. Next week is a perfect time to invite them here. We're actually starting a brand new series called Hot Topics, and the topics for this series, this is great, we'll talk more about it next week. We actually got the topics from people outside the church. We did a bunch of surveys, and they told us what they wanted to talk about. And that's what we're going to talk about over the next 5 weeks. In fact, the first one, which is the one that got the most hits for us, was God and science. Is it a contradiction to believe in God and science? And we're going to talk about that next week. Some of you have ones, and you're like, oh yeah, that'd be a great thing. Invite them here or invite them online. Now, we are so committed to this just because of, this is it right here, that we've actually created a website to help equip you in this whole thing, because most of us, we just don't know how to do this well. And so if you get on this site that we've created, theridgecc.com/year1, there's all sorts of stuff there. How do you have a spiritual conversation? How can you, invest more in someone? You need to get on this site. Now, here's the thing. As we talk about this isn't about making people projects. Jesus did this, and they never felt like projects. You see, this is actually a natural outflow when our faith is flourishing. This is making sure we focus on what Jesus is focused on. As we've gone through the last 18 months, one of the most common questions that people have asked me over the last 18 months is some version of these two questions. Why is our world such a mess? And what can we do about it? And let's be honest, our world is a mess. We got all sorts of political and racial chaos. We have all sorts of questions just about sexuality, and we have all sorts of things going on with technology, and what does that all mean? And we got violence everywhere. Why is our world such a mess, and what can we do about it? A few months ago, I was listening to a pastor. He was telling this story about a conversation he had with a friend of his who lived during the 60s. And as he's telling us, he's talking about how he was lamenting to this friend about all the stuff that's going on and how horrible it was. And he said his friend looked at him, he laughed at him, and then he responded with this. He said, racial tension? He said, man, you should have lived during the 60s. Because in the 60s, this is when the civil rights movement started, and America knew that it needed to change, but they didn't really know what to do, and so they killed MLK and other civil rights leaders during that time. He goes, that's racial trauma you have never experienced. And political chaos, well, man, we had JFK, and he was a very controversial figure, and then he was assassinated, and then we had the Watergate scandal, and then we had Vietnam, and then we had the draft, and on college campuses all over, we had riots going on. You've never experienced political chaos like that. And then we had the sexual revolution, and then we had the summer of love, and we had sex without consequences movement going on. And then he said, technical advancement. He goes, you guys think you're experiencing technical advancement because you have a phone that you can make poop emojis on. He said, we sent someone to the moon. And then he said this. He said, back then, people were asking the very same questions. But do you know what came out of all that chaos back then? The Jesus movement. And the Jesus movement was birthed because a bunch of young people rediscovered the teachings and the original call of Jesus, and they took it seriously. And as a result, God used them to not only transform a good chunk of the American church, but also major parts of culture in that time. Why is our world such a mess? Because my greatest need, your greatest need, whether you lived in the 60s or not, is not what we think it is. Every single person's greatest need is the forgiveness of their sin. And what can we do about it? Throughout history, God has always looked for a group of people that had the courage, because it takes courage, that's why very few people do it, that have had the courage to give themselves fully to his vision. And when they do, he does something transformational through them. And I'm telling you, our world is a mess right now. But people are more spiritually open than I've seen in a long time. Just over the last 18 months, our church has seen more people make first-time decisions than ever before in our young history. We've seen over 500 people make first-time decisions to follow Jesus. And those are just the ones who have told us. We know there is a lot more than that. And so as I think about things and I think about moving forward into what's next, my prayer is that group that God would look for, that would be me, that would be you, and that would be us. And when we lean back into that reality and that vision, I'm telling you, people will awaken to it because God will awaken them. And when he does, we will experience what our world needs the most, a spiritual awakening. Let me pray for us. And Father, there are just times where we just need to be reminded about what's most important. And there's so many messages just firing at us all the time. And they're always just pushing in our lives to be the most important thing. But Father, you're doing something in our world. And you're looking for a group of people. I pray it's us. That we go, we're in. We're in. We're going to give ourselves to your vision. And we're going to grow in our faith because we want to give ourselves even more to your vision. That our growth isn't just for us. It's for the people around us that you're already working in their lives and you're doing just some cool stuff. Just watch Libby's story. Man, there's so many stories like that going on. And if we want to see something change in our world, this is it. This is it. Because legislation, laws, none of that stuff changes things because it doesn't change the heart. Only you can change the heart. And Father, I thank you. We get to do this together. We get to be part of the greatest mission that we could ever be a part of. God, may we be found trustworthy in your sight for you to move like that. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.